starting to see articles every day pop up around how AI isn't as great as we think it is. Like it's not always right. In fact, it's wrong more often than it's right. And so I think what will happen is vendors will create solutions with AI to make their value proposition stronger, but they'll become experts in whatever their solution is. So they'll know when the AI is right or wrong, where somebody else might not.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing Podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I wear a bunch of other hats in the for-profit and nonprofit ecosystem, run an agency called Did It, and own a brand called Truth Nutrition, which I bought because I needed a place to run marketing experiments that I couldn't get fired for doing. So that ended up really handy. I'm super excited to be chatting with Sean Simon, who also wears a bunch of different hats. Is the podcast he's got coming back, and he's also got Blurbs and the Cogent Collective. And Sean, one of the things that was sort of a through theme for a lot of the stuff you're doing is complexity of the ad tech and MarTech landscape. And I think it's getting worse with AI, not better. So what was the catalyst for sort of how you decide to allocate your day every day and the problems you help folks solve?
Yeah, got it. It goes back to like I've been selling a really long time. I started off on the buy side, and I think back to 2010 when we had one Lumascape. If you're familiar with Lumascape, there was 250 vendors, right? And back then, I remember looking at this thing going, "This is confusing," but it was only one. That's a dream scenario today. Now there's 34 of them and 20,000 plus vendors, and so for a buyer, brand or agency, it's daunting and it's difficult to know whether you're making the right decision or not. So there's not a lot of confidence in the decisions that brands are making in the tech that they're investing in. And then as a seller, I noticed over time how much more difficult it was to get the attention of a buyer, right? Even people that I knew, right, weren't getting back to me. And it was because along with me, hundreds of other vendors were doing the exact same thing. And, they just couldn't read it. So they just gave up and they just stopped reading the email. Then they stopped reading the LinkedIn messages, or they go once a week. And I'll never go to text or phone. It's just not who I am. That's people's personal space, and I don't want to go there, but other vendors have no problem going there. And so what it created in our ecosystem was this distrust. Buyers don't trust vendors. And it made it really difficult for a seller to make any headway, even if they had the best solution or they had a product that resonated with or would resonate with a buyer. So we thought that my partner and I thought that there's got to be a better way to engage with buyers. So we started the Cogent Collective, which is a community, right? It was just meant to be a community of bringing buyers together, understanding what their pain points were, and helping them solve those problems. And then it's evolved more into a search consultancy. And then we wanted to sort of make that more scalable. And so we invented Blurbs, which is a platform that has, right now 1,300 plus vendors listed with unique content. This isn't just a directory that buyers can come on and do their own research and make anonymous inquiries, send messages to vendors anonymously to get answers to their questions without having to worry about getting inundated with the 20 follow-up emails and the phone calls and the LinkedIn messages until they're ready to engage. So our overall mission is really how do we change or make the buying ecosystem better for everyone?
Cool. Well, a lot of the rate of change is higher than ever before. And I think that's not going away either. And I think for a lot of the tech players, some of their technological moats are going away, right? Because you can vibe code a substitute for something, or vibe code an API to glue two or three things together where you might have had the single point solution, but now you can grab 3-point solutions and unify them in a way that you might never have been able to do before. And so how do you think that that's changing people's decision-making processes around that? Because there's new stuff popping out all the time. Obviously, any SaaS vendor or business of any kind, to be honest, wants to have LTV, right? They want to have stickiness, right? They know that, when they calculate whether or not that's an appropriate CAC to bring in a new customer, they're using LTV to calculate, can I afford to pay this much to bring somebody on? So they're in an increasingly complex marketplace from a buyer's perspective. And feel like maybe churn is becoming more of an issue, or maybe it isn't. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that sort of pace of change layer on top of all of this.
Yeah, I think I was having this conversation the other day, and I had a similar experience even 15 years ago where when I was at Criteo, I was pitching an agency. It was Hewlett Packard's agency at the time. And they're like, oh, we can do that. They can do what Criteo does. I'm like, okay, but are you? Right? They weren't, right? And they certainly couldn't do it as well. They didn't have 1,000 engineers working on algorithms to do what we did. So it was naive of them to think that they could do what we do. I think it's very similar right now. Starting to see articles every day pop up around how AI isn't as great as we think it is. Like it's not always right. In fact, it's wrong more often than it's right. And so I think what will happen is vendors will create solutions with AI to make their value proposition stronger, but they'll become experts in whatever their solution is. So they'll know when the AI is right or wrong, where somebody else might not. And so I think there's still going to be value in working with a vendor that has a point solution, even if they're using some AI, because you'll have more confidence in what it's actually doing, that it will be solving the problems that you needed to solve for. What it will do, though, is bring down the cost, right? Because the cost of operating the solutions will be lower. But to your point, competition's higher, so that's going to drive down costs as well.
Do you think that has implications on valuations of companies, both the publicly traded ones and the ones that aren't public, are still private?
Yeah, 100%. I think if you're a big company like the Trade Desk, maybe the impact isn't as great today as it might be in 5 or 10 years. But I think for these smaller point solution companies, yeah, valuations are going to be really tough because to your point earlier, what's their moat? What prevents somebody else from building a competitive product? And that's what they're going to have to figure out. Now, if they have that moat and they have that unique whatever it is, then they can justify the valuation. But it's going to be much harder than it was 15 years ago.
Great. Let's pivot a little bit more into the community, right? So you've got the Cogent Collective, which operates like a community, and there's a variety of those types of communities out there. Some of them are just CMOs. Some of them are go a little bit more into tech. Some of them, like you mentioned, two different ad tech companies, and of course MarTech is its own other area. And then there's MarTech specific to B2B, right? So you've got communities around that. So some of these communities sort of have a bit of a cat herding problem. So how do community managers deal with that, right? Because sometimes there's strong opinions within these communities. Sometimes the strong opinions are right. Sometimes they're not, but you still want to be diplomatic. Are the louder voices correct? Or how do you find a way to make sure everybody's getting value out of the community? So any best practices there?
Yeah, I think we built our community a little bit different than, say, some of these Slack groups, right? We went out and we curated people that we knew initially, right? So when we got to our first 100, we started to go to work, right? We're up to 500 people in the alpha from over 400 companies. But our model was we're going to survey, we're going to interview all these people, understand what their pain points are, what they're looking to learn. And then we're going to go out and look for emerging technologies that are solving that pain point or that problem from the ground up, as opposed to an established vendor that's been around and is pivoting. And then we help those companies go to market by putting them in front of the community. The community gets to sort of drive it, right? They're giving their feedback to the vendors and saying, look, this is what you should talk about. Lean in here. Forget about this. Here's how you should present. Here's how you should talk about this part of it. So that they were helping the vendors speak to them the way that they want to be spoken to, rather than be talked at. And I think that really went a long way for a lot of these vendors that we were working with and bringing into the community. It's really hard to get engagement. I would say, it's 80-20. Certainly 20% of our community is way more engaged than the other 80%. Right. But they were getting more value out of it because they were more engaged with us. We could help them more. It was free. The community at Cogent is free for the brands. But again, you're not going to get anything out of it if you don't engage. And so that's what we tell people, if you want to get something out of it, engage. If you're too busy, you're too busy. Can't help everybody.
Yeah, that's a great point on community. power curve, 80-20, 90-10, whatever it ends up being. And probably even when you slice the top quartile off and look at those activities, you probably have like another power curve there where you've got some particularly loud voices, and hopefully they're adding value to the community, right? The ones that are sort of the real, leaders or community leaders there. And does this community bridge into the IRL in real life side of things, or is it purely virtual at the moment?
It's virtual. We started it in March 2020. We literally started it the month of the pandemic, and so it just has always been virtual because our people are all over the world, certainly all over the country, and so they're rarely together. I mean, we go to Shop Talk, maybe there's a few of them there, but it's rare that they would be in the same place at the same time, and that really wasn't our focus. Our focus was just how do we make the ecosystem more friendly, right? And so buyers in the community can come to us and ask for help, and we shield them from the vendor ecosystem until we find vendors that we think are a good fit for them. And then we tell them, here's why, and here's who you should take a meeting with. And then we facilitate that. So we're protecting them from all that noise, and they're going to keep ignoring the emails and the LinkedIn messages and the text messages and still get the information they need and be confident in the decisions they're making. And we took that over to Blurbs, right? Blurbs is it's free for brands to use. So trustblurbs.com is a place where any buyer that buys marketing technology, advertising technology, e-com technology can come, search within 80 categories, find vendors, right? And learn about them, right? And we have RFI type questions with answers so that they're really getting everything they need to decide, okay, which vendors should I even be talking to? And then they can build lists, and then they can actually reach out to these vendors anonymously, ask follow-up questions that are specific to their needs, and then they get an email back. And now they have the answers. They have a contact person. They choose who to engage with. It's not this high-pressure sales that we've come accustomed to.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. The anonymous having the initial communications be anonymous is a really interesting twist to it, and I can't think of many other places that have done that, if any, right? And I think that the protection of the identity of the buyer also is interesting from the perspective of, although the different sizes, right? So obviously not even for the same solution, right? Depending on whether you're GMV is a million a year, 5 million, 10 million, 50 million, 100 million plus, whatever, right? The solution isn't necessarily identically the same, right? But it's interesting that one can go in there and request information and have a conversation. I don't know whether you do share KPIs early while anonymous with the vendors to help them decide how to answer the questions or go through and make recommendations or not. I'd love to get more into that.
Yeah, we don't really share the KPIs. What we are launching is an AI agent, right? And so that agent is going to be more aligned to the way buyers are acting today, right? People are getting more and more comfortable with the agentic search engines out there. And so if they can come into Blurbs and they can just be like, hey, I'm a retailer. I sell clothes or fashion to women. I have 7,000 products. We operate on Shopify, and we use these other things in our tech stack. And we're looking for a new, whatever, loyalty program. Who should we be considering? Well, we'll be able to go through all of the data that we have. And it isn't just the data that's on the webpage. It's the data that the vendors are able to provide us, pitch decks, one-pagers, whatever it might be, that we keep behind the scenes that our agent will search through, but won't be publicly available. So then we can come back in our response and say, here's 3 vendors that work really well for Shopify brands who sell fashion that also use these solutions, right? And now they have like 2 or 3 vendors they can just dig deep into that'll all work, right? But they don't have to waste their time sifting through the other solutions on the market to figure out that these are the 2 or 3 they should be looking at. And so what that does for the vendors is it accelerates their sales cycle. So now when a buyer engages with them, the buyer is that much further along in their journey. Hopefully you can close this deal within a matter of days or weeks, not months. And that's why it's beneficial to both sides of the ecosystem.
Cool. Do people describe it almost like a concierge service to some extent? I mean, it's got some consultative elements, some concierge elements, some matchmaker elements to it, but it's a little bit of everything. And to what extent do you think the AI can take some of that heavy lifting off of sort of internal subject matter experts who might be able to also help.
Well, I think it comes down to the data we were actually working from, right? So the more data that a vendor provides us about their business, the better they'll appear in the results that we bubble up, right? So if you're not giving us anything, or if you're only giving us a one pager and it's not really clear, then your competitors are going to bubble up in a much better way than you are. Right. So it really serves them well to provide us everything they can. Again, we're not going to give away that information. It's not publicly available. Their competitors won't see it, but it's going to help make the engine smarter. And it's a walled garden, so you can't get this information off of ChatGPT. So if you want it, you got to come to us to get it if you're a buyer, right? But it's free to use, and it's going to make your life so much better, and you're going to be able to make confident decisions.
So we didn't talk that much about the seller side, right? So obviously, just like ladies' night, right? One side's in there free and one side's not.
Yeah.
So how do the sellers of the platforms participate in the community? Is it a common sort of boilerplate relationship that you've got with them, or does it differ
It, it,
based
it,
on
diff-
yours?
Sorry. Yeah, it'll differ, right? There's different tiers, right? It's a freemium model, right? So you can certainly just, have your blurb up there. We don't want to deprive the buyer of knowing you exist. That doesn't serve anyone. But if you want to enhance your experience so that you're presenting yourself better, there's different tiers that you can buy into. And it's really about answering the questions we know buyers want answers to, right? So when you sign up, as a vendor, you can answer questions, the operational questions, the category specific questions, provide us with case studies, your own voice, what makes you special, what makes you different from your competitors. They come on my podcast and we'll have that content up there as well. They get to give a 3-minute video. So they really get to present themselves as if they were in the room, but we're giving the control to the buyer to decide who they want to have in their room, right? And I think what it does for the vendor, having run sales teams, it ensures that my sales team isn't chasing the wrong business or closing the wrong deals, because the buyers are self-qualifying themselves. They're reading your answers. They know whether you're a good fit or they're a good fit for you. And then when you do get that lead, you know that this buyer is serious. They're further down the pipe. They're ready to convert. And it's going to happen within a certain period of time. You can get them off your pipeline if they don't close, because they're going to make a decision much faster rather than let them linger for 6 months. Look, salespeople tend to be overly optimistic. They leave things sitting in their pipeline way too long. The deal's long gone, right? It's closed somewhere else, but they don't take it off. Like, we're going to inform them, hey, they picked somebody else, get it off your pipeline. I'm not going to say it like that, but you get what I'm saying. Like, we want to be the conduit between buyers and sellers and help shape that relationship to make sure that it's friendlier and more trustworthy.
So obviously, until all the buyers are coming through the Blurbs matching engine, the sellers will have to have secondary marketing and secondary sales strategies. So putting yourselves in the shoes of both sort of the CMO and CRO of these players, like, how would you recommend they mix up their marketing plans? Like, how should they allocate their budgets across the ecosystem? Because of course trade shows are back, but they have some issues as far as face-to-face meetings go at trade shows and conferences. Big chunk of the buying audience just never go to trade shows. They may or may not have the T&E budget to go. They may just be introverts, or they may hate being accosted when they go to these shows because they have a badge that has a brand name on it, right? So there's all sorts of reasons why a big chunk of the B2B buying public don't show up at the shows. They may also, not be that reachable on some of the channels like LinkedIn, right? So if you were wearing the hat of the same folks, or the folks you talk to all the time on the selling side, what else should they be doing to maybe reinforce trust, build awareness, so that by the time the person comes across that brand, if they happen to be coming across it in the Blurbs environment, they already have a positive inclination towards that.
Yeah, like, I think selfishly participating in Blurbs shows the buying community that you're a team player, right? You want to be part of the community. You don't want to be a pain in the butt. You're just trying to run a business, right? And I think if they do that and they stop with the spam, they stop with the SDR tools that are out there. If I get another email, I literally got an email this morning, a LinkedIn message with a question mark as like a follow-up to the previous message. Like that's his sales tactic. Like, I don't know if that was automated. It had to been, right? But like they're being abused. Like these tools that the vendors are using, whether it's their SDRs or an outsourced company, it's making them look really bad. So rather than tell you what they should be doing, I would say don't do that, right? Don't spam people. It's, because if people see it, they're probably not going to see it. But if they do see it, they're gonna have a negative opinion of you, not a positive opinion. I think if I had to give advice, I think what I see working is the sort of the consultative nature of sales, right? So I have friends that work at different tech companies. They call me and say, "Hey, Sean, I see you're connected to so and so at this company. Is that relationship strong? Can you make an introduction?" And LinkedIn, like everybody, 1 out of 10 is strong. So I'm like, yeah, I know that person well, or I haven't talked to that person in years, or I've never spoken to that person. So I think leveraging your contacts that way and finding a more friendly way to go about it is the way to go. Now, when you get the introduction, don't blow it, right? Don't go back into your old habits and be really aggressive. Buyers don't want that aggressive sales process anymore. And I think one thing sellers have to remember is that the buying community is getting younger and younger. We're all getting older and older, right? And when I started, I was in my mid 20s. I'm, in my mid 50s now. So when you reach out to buyers, think about your kids, right? Like they don't respond that way. They're not as social. They don't want to go to events. They don't want to have long conversations. They want to do 80% of the homework themselves without speaking to a human before they engage. They don't want to have that conversation. It's just not in their nature. So understand the psychology of it. It's really hard, right? Because I'm 2 generations from the people, at that level now. You got to think about it.
Yeah, that those are some great points. And then, for the buyers, right? So obviously not all the buyers that are in Blurbs helping, narrow the field down as they go through the decision-making process are in the youngest generation. Some of them are more savvy and have made buying the mistakes in the past, right? So for the buyer, what are some of the traps that they still fall into? Like, is it paying attention to the sizzle? Is it, getting over influenced by a case study that's, a completely different type of customer, right? So if I see a, case study as a, I own Truth Nutrition, right? So if I see a case study for GNC, got nothing to do with me, right? It's
Right.
also a supplement related company, but completely unrelated. So it doesn't necessarily mean I should buy that thing, right? So what advice would you give to the buying community, once they get down to the, the bake off, right? Where they've got 2 or 3 players and they're like, I think it's really going to be these folks who I'll have the in-depth conversation, with. They don't want to make the wrong decision. So what are some ways that they can protect themselves from making the wrong decision?
Yeah, I think 2 things. I think first thing, even before they get to that point, is don't just take recommendations from your friends and your colleagues as gospel. Because if they work at a different company, maybe they had a different pain point to solve, they're in a different revenue category, whatever it might be, it might not be the right fit for you, even though it's a good solution. So keep that in mind. Like make sure you're comparing the right solutions on the right terms. And I think when you get down to that final 2 or 3, think past the current moment. Think 6, 12 months down the line, 2 years down the line. Is this a solution that I believe can grow with me? Or, they solve my pain points today, but in 6 months, I know that they're going to be different. Will they be able to solve? And then the other trap they be careful of is sometimes vendors will say we have something or we can do something, but maybe it's on the roadmap and they don't actually do it today. And so really dig in to make sure that you see it. It's actually a product today, not just something that they're telling you they're going to have so they can close the deal. One of the things that we did at Blurbs we thought was really important is we call it the Blurbs Brain Trust. It's an advisory board, but we have got 40 advisors from brands. These are CMOs and heads of e-commerce. They're helping us navigate what you're asking me, right? We want to make sure we're speaking to them the right way, that our categorization structure is the way it's intuitive to the way a buyer thinks, that we're asking the right questions in those RFIs that they need answers to, right? Even on the podcast, I'll have a co-host every week that'll rotate. It'll be a different brand, different person from a brand, whether it's marketing or e-commerce, helping me interview the vendor, not to poke holes in the vendor, but to really extract what their value proposition is, because sometimes they have a hard time articulating it, but doing it from the buyer's perspective. So I think there are different ways you can go about it to feel more comfortable in the decision that you're making.
So yeah, we talked about the future of vendors, right? And obviously vendors sometimes get acquired and, product roadmaps change as a result of that. Others that are startups may run out of money. And that's an even more risky scenario where perhaps, they had everything that you wanted, but they weren't cash positive, right? And they were never able to get there. So there's all sorts of risk factors surrounding that. But, the other thing that is sort of more of a macroeconomic systemic factor that I don't think anybody really has a firm grasp on there is like when the consumer buyers and B2B buyers for that matter start to use agentic technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I just basically have some platform that I choose to use, it's agentic, and I say, look for a Caribbean cruise in a first class cabin of this square footage or greater, traveling between these dates for less than $2,600 for a 7-day cruise, right? And let me know when you find one. And it may be going for $3,800 at the moment, right? But agentically, you can just have the two systems talk to each other, and then all of a sudden it pops up. And most of the buying there was done, as it relates to me making the decision, was done agentically, right? And now we're not there yet, but at the speed that things are traveling, that may end up first showing up in consumer, or maybe first showing up in certain industry categories like travel, where you've got yield management means that prices are all over the map all the time, right? So once things move to that, how do you think that changes things for the e-com side of things, or on the B2B side?
Yeah, I know there's all this talk out there that people are going to go to Perplexity or ChatGPT and do a search and buy, right? If we get there, I think we're a ways off. We're a lot further away than I think people really think that say that we are today, right? Like, I still feel like people have relationships with brands, right? And I'm never going to feel like, at least today, that when I do a search on ChatGPT or whatever agentic search, that I'm getting all the information that I need to make a responsible decision. I just bought my son a pair of shoes. He suppinates, right, when he walks. So it's hard to find the right pair of shoes. And if you ask ChatGPT, it comes back with all the big brands, the Brooks, the Nikes, the Adidas. None of them have the support for supination, which is less common. And so if you don't understand that, you've got to dig in there. And really, I had to go. Obviously, I had to go to some of the manufacturer websites and read about their shoes and make sure they're speaking my language. Are they solving my problem, not making me make some kind of assumption? So I think that people will, first on the B2B side, then consumer side, will get more comfortable with it. And I think we're talking like 5 to 10 years at least. And I think sooner for B2B. And I think, but what brands have to understand is, how do people search? It's not as simple as a keyword, right? Like on Google, you just put in like shoes or supination. But if you're putting in something like, I need a pair of shoes to support my supination, and I walk 6 miles a day, and I work as a waitress, and I stand on my feet, what's the best shoe for me? Like, that's context, right? And if the brand doesn't understand context, they're not gonna show up in these searches. And everybody searches differently. So there's lots of variations to that. So I think it's going to be a while before consumers start searching like that. But brands need to pay attention to how people are searching.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. As a matter of fact, the SEO practice that did it, at my agency, we were doing SEO before Google existed. So we've been along for a really long ride. But, now obviously prospects and clients are asking about answer engine optimization, or GE, or generative engine optimization. And, a lot of that really does revolve around that upper funnel research, right? As well as getting confirmatory information. So it's just saying something once, right, isn't usually enough to sway a probabilistic LLM, right? But when a lot of places say the same thing, perhaps not in identical language, but semantically or from a vectorization perspective, they all sort of have a consensus, right? That's when the brand will start to pop. That's when a particular product will start to pop. And I think a lot of folks on both sides of your ecosystem really haven't fully thought that through yet. right? From the perspective of, there may be some early influence as a result of just one brand having done answer engine optimization better while continuing to do SEO, because the 12 blue links aren't gone forever, right? Some people will continue to prefer to engage and information seek that way. But there are different types of queries that show up in each of the locations, right? The really more complex deep dive stuff is starting to migrate its way over to the Claudes and ChatGPTs, where you are describing the supination and the fact that there's all these other factors. And of course, you're saying the LMs aren't doing a particularly good job yet, but that's because they have sparser data, right? So if there were a manufacturer of, that produced, 200,000 pairs a year, but they really had a lot of deep level data about the shoe that's for pronation, the shoe that's for supination, the way in which you can custom order it, and et cetera. And then it started to be spoken about by influencers, and all these other third-party locations were reinforcing that language. They would be the ones that would show up in your search, right? But I don't think people have yet had this sort of epiphany, this aha moment about, okay, I know how to do SEO. How do I do, answer engine optimization?
Well, I think it's a fair point. I think that the challenge is that buyers don't even know how to search with agentic yet. Like, they don't know what words they should be using, or what order they should be putting the words, or how to talk to it. And so we even thought about this when we're building out our agent, is like, we need to train people to ask questions a certain way, so that they can get the most out of the search results,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And I think with the problem that I personally experience when I go to ChatGPT, it's almost like there's just too much data out there for ChatGPT to give me the best answer, right? They give me the best answer it can give me, but I know it's not the right answer. I've tested this out with subjects where I knew the answer and I wanted to see what came back, and it's rarely right. It rarely gives me the answer I think it should give me, and I just think that maybe it's just too much out there. Where, like, when we build ours, we're building something very specific, and this goes back to one of your first questions. I think that these point solutions that use agentic technology to build out their solutions, they're very focused on a point solution that they can do a better job than a broad-based solution. And if they harness all of that data properly. So I think we're further away than most people think we are, from having a perfect one-stop shop for everything. I think you're going to have to go to your specific, communities or websites to kind of get the answers you need.
Great. Well, we certainly covered a ton of ground, Sean, and a lot. You made a lot of great points for buyers and sellers of the tech, as well as for the e-commerce players themselves. So thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
It's my pleasure, Kevin. It's been a lot of fun.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.